Mr. Howard Marks has a net worth of $2.1 billion. He has been an investor for over 50 years, compounding his personal wealth at 19% per annum. If you don't know what that means, an initial investment worth $1,000 would have been $6 million today. Yeah, you're hearing it right. $6 million. His firm is famous for investing in distressed companies who are thrown down by the markets and are available at pennies to their worth. There are very few who have compounded their wealth at such high returns for such a long time, much like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. On a regular basis, he would write memos to his clients, and being so experienced, people would often ask him the secret to be a successful investor. And to them, he would always tell, the most important thing in investing is A. And then someone would ask him something else, and he would say, the most important thing in investing is B. And so on and so forth. Only later realizing that there is not just one important thing to be a successful investor. In this book, he tells about what are the things he thinks are most important to be a successful investor. This is the Better Investor, helping you achieve your financial goals and freedom through organizing your finance, stock market investing, and learning from billionaires. And these are top 5 lessons from the book, The Most Important Thing, Uncommon Sense for a Thoughtful Investor, written by Howard Marks. Lesson number 1. The second level thinking. If you buy individual stocks, then definitely your goal isn't to earn average return. Otherwise, you would have bought S&P 500 index or Nifty 50 index. You want to be better than average. Thus your thinking has to be better than that of the average too, which he calls as second level thinking. And Howard says it is very rare. And if a billionaire investor with over 5 decades of experience says that, then you have to hear him. First level thinking says, it's a good company, let's buy the stock. Second level thinking says, it's a good company but everyone think it's a great company and it's not. So the stock is overrated and overpriced. Let's sell. First level thinking says, the market outlook calls for low growth. There is lockdown everywhere. Inflation is rising. Let's dump our stock. Second level thinking says, the outlook stinks. The situation is bad. But everyone is selling in panic. The price is too low. Let's buy. First level thinking says, I think the company's earnings will fall. So let's sell. Second level thinking says, the earnings will fall less than what people expect, and pleasant surprise will lift the stock up. Let's buy. First level thinking is simplistic and superficial, and anyone can do that. Just like the outlook for the company is favorable, so stock will go up. But Howard says that second level thinking is deep and complex. He says, those who consider the investment process simple and are not aware of the need for second level thinking are fooled to believe that everyone can be a successful investor. 1 or 2 good years may practically prove nothing about your skill. You may have heard of someone doubling your money last year in matter of months, but in the long run, he says it means nothing until someone has a process to repeat it over and over again. Doubling your money in first year and then not being able to do it ever again for the next 10 years is just an average annual return of 7%. However, if you don't double your money anytime, which your friend next door may have done, but consistently earn 19% return every year for the next 10 years, that would make your money more than 5.5 times of initial investment. To consistently be right, you need to develop the second level thinking, which is different from the average crowd. Lesson number 2. Relationship between price and value. 1970s was a time of Nifty 50 frenzy in America. All the mutual funds and individual investors bought stocks in the top 50 companies at that time. These were considered companies of very high quality. These included Pepsi, McDonald's, Kodak. People could not imagine the life without copier of Xerox, cameras and films of Kodak, phone sets of Motorola, drinks of Pepsi and burgers of McDonald's. And everyone invested in these companies, especially the first level thinkers, thinking that they have made investment in a quality company and thus it is safe. But it was a foolish mistake. Just to pull out an example, in 1970s, stock price of McDonald's had gone from adjusted rate of 12 cents to more than $1 within a span of 3 years. That is almost 9 times your money. Crazy. But main reason for this was because everyone knew that McDonald's was great and everyone wanted to buy it. Sadly, nothing goes to the moon. Its downward journey started and the stock price dropped to less than 20 cents in 1976, wiping out 90% of the wealth of those who thought their investments were safe in a quality company like McDonald's. It would then take McDonald's 6 more years for its stock price to reach $1. Howard Marks says that no asset is so good that it can't become a bad investment if bought at too high a price. In his words, no asset class or no stock or investment has the birthright of high return. It is only attractive if it is priced right. Investors with no knowledge of profits, dividends, valuation, or the conduct of business simply cannot process the resolve needed to do the right thing at the right time. With everyone around them buying and making money, they cannot know when a stock is too high and therefore resist joining in. So the lesson here is, it's not enough to buy a share in a good idea or a good business. You must buy it at a reasonable or bargain price. Lesson number 3. Understanding risk. Investing consists of exactly one thing: dealing with the future. And because none of us can know the future with certainty, risk is inescapable. The investors who get their monthly statement and find that their account has made 15% a year actually don't know whether their money manager did a good job or a bad one. In order to reach a conclusion, they need to have an idea about how much risk did their managers took with their money. Many people also mistake risk with the volatility. The fact that the publicly traded price of any stock fluctuates a lot does not make it risky. The real risk lies in permanent loss of capital. In general, there is a common jargon among people entering the stock market that only way to achieve higher returns is that you must bear higher risk. But Howard says this is not true, because if risky asset classes could be reliably counted upon to give high returns, then they would not be risky at all. Investing in a risky asset class can only increase the number of probable outcomes of a situation in future. You may sometimes get high returns, but then there would be times when your capital can be completely wiped off. Consider investing in a fixed income instrument. The range of outcome is minuscule. You will get guaranteed 6 to 8% from your pension scheme. But consider investing in a stock of a newly founded automobile company. The automobile company could do a tech-turning invention, driving the company's profits from nothing to above the roof. But also, since the owners have no experience, they may also run under the risk of putting their company under huge losses. This range of outcome, from profits running through roof or our balance sheet running under red losses, is what Howard calls as the diverse probable outcomes, which makes an investment risky. Once you understand that worst come worst what can happen with the business of the company you own, you have successfully recognized the risk. What matters in long run is not the returns that you expect from your investments, but more than that, what is the risk involved if things don't turn out as you expect them to be. All great investors like Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch are known in investing space not just for their high returns, but their ability to control the disasters. If I tell you to jump from an aircraft with a parachute for a price of $1 billion, but also saying that the probability of parachute opening successfully is just 90%, will you jump? You will be a fool to do that. Even if the chances of parachute not opening is just 10%, we cannot rule out its possibility, because if that happens, you won't be alive. The road to long-term investment success runs through risk control more than through aggressiveness. Over the lifetime, results of most investors would be determined more by how many losers they have and how bad they are, rather than by the greatness of the winners. Skillful risk control is the mark of a successful investor. Lesson number 4. Be attentive to cycles. In your road to investing, you may go wrong and things may change, but Marx says that there are two concepts which he can hold to with extreme confidence. Rule number 1. Most things will prove cyclical. Rule number 2. Some of the greatest opportunities for gain and loss come when other people forget rule number 1. The basic reason for the cyclicality in our world is the involvement of humans. Obviously, the quantitative reasons like world events, environmental changes do play part, but it's the application of investor psychology to these events that determines the amplitude of fluctuation of these cycles. We become over optimistic when things are going good and ultra pessimistic when things are going bad. Though the housing bubble popped in US in 2008, but its effects vibrated in entire world. In India, the interest rates were also low and policies were made for people to take loans, cut tax and buy a house. But there were not so many of the houses available, so builders started building inventories. They took huge piles of loans to fund new projects. The price of homes in India were rising at the rate of around 30% annually, which is unimaginable for a rental property. Builders were minting money and becoming rich. If you were able to take debt and sell off just one single project, you were bound to have more than enough for the rest of your life. Seeing the opportunity, people became greedy and built their inventories to insane level, some of which are still not filled because supply became far greater than demand. During this time, the demand for stocks of real estate companies was very high in the market. A company named Unitech, which was then second largest home developer in India, its stock price went from 2 rupees in 2005 to 500 rupees in 2008, a gigantic return of 250 times the initial value. But you would also be surprised to know that currently, after more than 12 years of the housing bubble burst, the stock price of Unitech is just 1 rupee. DLF was another famous company of that time. It took big housing projects in big Indian cities. It was considered a quality company, and the common jargon with people was that everyone is going to buy a house, so buy the stock of DLF. People even bought the stock at the price of rupees 1100 Indian rupee in 2008 at the extreme optimism. Today, it trades at 250 rupees in 2021. If these are not swings of a pendulum, then what are they? When demand weakened for the houses, no one was buying these houses. Builders were trapped with piles of debt. Many builders even filed for bankruptcy. The demonetization of old currency in India added to it, which further generated a negative sentiment, and more builders shaft out, leaving just a few ones behind. Howard says that those who survive the downfall are going to be the biggest beneficiaries when the next real estate upcycle starts. When some trend goes for a little long, people see it as a normalcy and expect it to go on forever. But when cycle turns, they are trapped. In Howard's words, he says, people think that companies that are doing well will always do well, and vice versa. That assumption is a road to disaster. He says investment markets follow a pendulum-like swing between euphoria and depression, between celebrating positive developments and obsessing over negative ones, and thus being overpriced and underpriced. This oscillation is one of the most dependable features of the markets, and human psychology tends to spend much more time at extremes than it does at a happy medium. S&P 500, one of the oldest index, has annual average return of 10% since its inception. But in isolation, it has given exact 10% returns less than 10 times out of last 50 years. Most of the times, they were either more than 20% or less than minus 20%. Howard says there is only one way to describe most investors. They are trend followers. Superior investors are exact opposite. They buy things when the crowd is extremely pessimistic about the outlook. This he refers in his book as 3 stages of bull market. The first stage, when a few forward-looking people begin to believe things will get better. These are the ones who make most money. The second, when most investors realize improvement is actually taking place. And the third stage, when everyone concludes things will get better forever. And to surprise, Howard says that the third stage of the bull market is when there is extreme participation. Lesson number 5. Invest like it's soccer. Marx says that investing is much like soccer. In soccer, the same 11 players are on the field for essentially the whole game. There isn't an offensive squad or a defensive squad. The same people have to play both ways, dealing with all eventualities. Collectively, those 11 players must have the potential to score goals and stop the opposition from scoring more. Thus, a soccer coach has to decide whether to field a team that emphasizes offense in order to score a lot of goals or defense, hoping to shut out the other team and find the net once. Because coaches know they won't have many opportunities to switch between offensive and defensive personnel during the game, they have to come up with a winning lineup and pretty much stick with it. The choice between offense and defense in investing should be based on how much the investor believes is within his or her control. Offense would mean taking risk for aspiration of higher returns, and defense would mean to invest to avoid a pitfall. For example, in 1992, another great investor, George Soros, took massive leverage from the banks worth rupees $10 billion to short the British pound because he was skeptical about the new British economical policies and that British currency would weaken. He had superior insight and the trade turned in his favor. In single week, George Soros made profit of $1 billion. This you can consider as playing offensive. Though you may say that it was very risky, but when asked about it, George Soros said that he had studied the policies in depth and was very sure that the policies would weaken the British pound, or else why would he take such a huge leverage? And for defense, you can consider the example of none other than our Omahan hero, Warren Buffett. During the tech mania of 1999, Warren Buffett did not have a single investment in some of the hot tech names. He patiently watched everyone becoming rich overnight, but he was skeptic about the optimism with how everyone was buying the stocks in these companies. TV news channels and mutual fund managers even made fun of Warren during that period of time and regarded him as old school, stubborn and stupid for not participating in new technology. But when the tech bubble burst, all these people who had been buying all the way up were sitting with their butts in red and crying about their losses. And during this time, Warren Buffett was buying stocks at bargains with the money he had accumulated during this bull market. To be offensive or defensive about an asset depends on situation, and investor must be attentive to these. The professional tennis player play the winner's game, which means the winner is the one who plays aggressive, the one who can place the shots at special spots at correct occasion. Whereas the tennis that you and me and the non-professionals play is the loser's game, which means in this, the winner is the one who makes the least mistakes. Howard says that if you're skeptical about which game you must play, for those of us, he says, play the game of amateur, that is winning by making least mistakes. That was pretty much. Let's have a quick recap. To be a successful investor, you must develop second level thinking. You have to think about a situation in a way that most of the people are not thinking about. No asset is too good that it cannot become a bad investment if you overpay for it. In investing, you are not rewarded for investing at good companies, but are rewarded for investing in them at the right price. Returns from an investment must not be seen in isolation. The judge of a good investment is the returns produced from it bearing the risk. Before looking at reward in a particular investment, look at risk involved. Most businesses are cyclical. This is primarily due to involvement of human psychology and reaction of humans to certain events. However, the extremes of cyclicality also pose few of the great opportunities of the lifetime, if you can identify them correctly. You need to think of investing like soccer and position yourself in offensive or defensive way. When you have insight about an event or some edge, it is worthwhile to be offensive at those moments. Rest of the times, investing defensively is a fine approach. And last but not the least, the success of an investor depends more on the number of bad investments and their magnitude rather than the good ones. That's it guys. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I will come again with lessons of another book related to stock market investing or finance soon. Until then, cheers guys.